Okay, welcome back. In this section, we're going to be talking about unlearning. There's a lot of concepts in forming identity and in counseling that are fairly counterintuitive. So, what I've learned over the course of my career is that unlearning things like false beliefs, unhealthy habits, unhealthy forms of coping, and identifying attitudes that keep us stuck and unlearning those is every bit as important, in fact, quite often foundational to learning new ways of being and identifying positive ways of coping that work for us. So, false beliefs, again, we've discussed this, but the three most common themes in therapy, in my experience and according to many experts, is I am not safe, I am not acceptable, and I am not lovable. Now, there's an important caveat here. If there is something in your life or in your client's life that is objectively unsafe, that needs to be identified and addressed prior to all else. So if your client is living with any form of abuse, if they have domestic violence or intimate partner violence in their lives, if they are abusing substances, if they have an eating disorder that has developed in being medically compromised, if there's any objective threat to their well-being, we need to identify that and we need to find resources for that. It's something that we'll endlessly learn about as far as who are the real experts on this, what are the resources in my community, and how do I help people get the help that they most need. When it comes to the other two false beliefs or the themes of those beliefs, quite often what we're doing is challenging those beliefs. I would ask you if there is a reason why you feel that you're not enough or a reason that you feel you're not lovable. Is there any evidence of that? Is there any objective proof of that? And then I might also ask, are there any healthy people who agree with that assessment, who agree with that truth? And quite often what I hope to do is plant seeds of doubt and say, I don't see it that way. Can I offer you a different perspective? Can I offer you a different opinion on that? And sometimes what we end up doing is planting seeds of doubt where a person starts to challenge things that are deeply ingrained, were learned perhaps very early in life. And the benefit of being given another perspective is that it gives an opportunity to critically examine and choose, do I really believe that this is true rationally? Do I believe that this is a fact? Or is this simply a feeling that has always been with me? Is this simply something that was taught to me perhaps by people who were sick and selfish, or perhaps by people who simply did not have to give what I needed. In terms of, excuse me, forms of coping, what I find is that those come in two main types, things that we consciously choose to do and things that we subconsciously choose to do. Anything that exists in a person's subconscious can be brought forward into consciousness. But if it is a habit, if it is something that we do reflexively, I think of it as an emotional reflex. Like when you go to the doctor and she taps your knee and your leg moves, that is a reflex. Emotionally, we do something very similarly. When we survive abuse or neglect, when we have experienced trauma, there are a number of physiological forms of coping that are designed to repress emotion, memory, and particular thoughts. So the most common one actually is holding our breath. It's something that people like me learned to do as children. It is something that when control is taken away from a child, when an environment is unsafe, it is one of the few things that a child can almost always control. So it's something to notice if you are feeling stressed, if you are experiencing intense sadness or anger or fear, you may find that you hold your breath. You may also find that stress and what we've referred to as negative emotion manifests in your body in terms of muscle tension. Quite often I talk to folks and I'll ask, how are you? And they'll say, I'm fine. And I'll say, I don't think that's what fine looks like. I think, if your shoulders are trying to eat your earlobes, clearly your body's manifesting something. And quite often, we really don't have a sense of how we're feeling, but we can always just kind of scan our bodies real quick and get a sense of what is our body trying to tell us about our current feelings, about our current view of our safety. And can we just make conscious decisions about that? So obviously, when you notice that you're holding your breath, it's always good to breathe. It's always good to breathe deeply. When you notice tension, it's always good to release it. Sometimes that's hard to do, so I'll encourage folks to increase the tension so that they can then release it. I'm always encouraging folks to notice their heart rate, to notice their gastrointestinal system. Everything in the GI system is typically triggered when we're experiencing chronic anxiety or chronic stress. And I'll ask, what can you do to help your body feel better? What can you do to cope with this? And quite often, finding various forms of release are the most important pieces to that. The next piece that I'll build on and ask you to consider is that if you find that you try not to, or maybe you've developed a habit of subconsciously blocking particular memories or thoughts or feelings, I would suggest that that is a very unnatural thing to do. Thoughts, memories, and feelings occur very naturally, and anything that occurs naturally and internally should not be judged. Feelings are not right or wrong. They're not good or bad. They simply exist. And they're frustrating sometimes because they don't even have to make sense. So I'll half joke with my clients that I'm not a rocket scientist, but when people do unnatural things, I expect them to struggle. I expect them to have increased amounts of stress. I expect that their immune system and the physiology of their cells will be negatively impacted. And I want to help them come to a place where they feel better self-control physically, hopefully have better health, and then make conscious decisions about how they will cope with things that they find stressful or upsetting. There's thousands of potential coping mechanisms, and we choose them consciously or subconsciously. When we find that we have unhealthy ways of coping, we typically never just stop doing those. We replace them. And this is a challenge because we have to develop a reasonable amount of awareness and a reasonable amount of confidence in our ability to do something different. So examples of that for folks who cut or burn or otherwise damage their bodies, I will encourage them to destroy something that doesn't have value. It may sound a little bit silly, but for folks who have a habit of cutting, shredding paper, ripping something tends to provide a release that is not the same, but is beneficial. And the lesson there is to destroy something that has no value as opposed to destroying something that has enormous value. In terms of substance use, that's always a concern. People like me use substances to numb emotions that we find overwhelming. We use it to cope with stress, and unfortunately, progressively, we use it to cope with every part of life. And so learning to have other forms of coping requires that sometimes it requires that we get treatment, and it most often requires that we get an enormous amount of natural support and peer support in recovery from addiction. So we're going through a process here where we're identifying what are the things that I believe that don't serve me, what are the habits that are beneficial to me or not, what are the ways in which I cope, and are they healthy or unhealthy. We need to move past ideas of good or bad. That good or bad is about morality. Healthy or unhealthy is a much more efficacious, much more beneficial approach to how we cope and how we live. getting down to some really simple, basic habits. Procrastination is a very common habit for people like myself. And we would actually tell you that we do our best work, for example, when our back's against the wall. And I've learned a lot about that. It's true, but the reason that it's true is because it's where we have the most experience functioning from. Procrastination is almost always fear. We know that it's a bad habit. We do it anyway. And the way I encourage my clients to think about it is if you're going to procrastinate, do it honestly. Because otherwise, you may find that you're feeling guilty or feeling bad about yourself while you're doing something that you enjoy instead of fulfilling that responsibility. So, whatever we're going to do, whether it's healthy or unhealthy, we need to be more aware of it. The key to awareness is mindfulness. And then progressively, we're going to help make healthier decisions about what serves us and what does not. Um, okay, so this would be a good thing to maybe do a little bit of writing about. Take a few quick notes. What are the things I believe that aren't true? What are the habits that don't serve me or even destroy me? What are the things that I wish I could do that would be healthier for me, more beneficial for my career, my relationships, my health? And just start brainstorming some ideas about how you can unlearn those and what you can replace them with so that progressively we have something that's a lot more manageable and a lot more sustainable.